I'm Madiha. So let me begin with a brief introduction to the concept of Maslahah Mursalah. So in Islamic jurisprudence, Maslahah Mursalah refer to the public welfare or benefit which is not explicitly defined in the Quran or Sunnah, but is inferred through reasoning, or we call it as ijtihad. This concept allows Islamic scholars to address societal problems that are not directly mentioned in the main source of Islamic law, like Al-Quran. So, the key purpose of Maslahah Mursalah is to ensure that the law remains relevant and adaptable to the needs of society without compromising the core moral and ethical standards found in Islam. It is essentially about balancing public welfare and the preservation of Islamic values. So, for example, when the societal challenges arise that are not specifically covered in the Quran or Sunnah, Maslahah Mursalah provide a framework to find the solutions that align with the greater goods. Now, let's talk about how Maslahah Mursalah plays a crucial role in Islamic law. So, one of the main aspects of Maslahah Mursalah is its flexibility. It allows Islamic law to adapt to contemporary issues, ensuring that the legal system remain responsive to the needs of society while upholding Islamic principles. So, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many legal decisions were made based on Maslahah Mursalah. So, even though the Quran and Sunnah didn't specifically outline rules for dealing with a global health crisis like COVID, Islamic law was able to adapt by prioritizing public welfare, such as health and safety, over traditional practices like the suspension of certain religious activities in order to prevent harm. So, this demonstrates how Maslahah Mursalah ensure that Islamic law serve the public interest while still adhering to the core ethical values of Islam. So, it allows for a dynamic approach to solving modern challenges without comprising religious principle. So next, my friends will discuss much deeper about this Maslahah Mursalah.
Maslahah refers to actions or decisions taken to protect public welfare when there is no clear ruling in the Quran or Hadith. The word Maslahah means benefit or goodness, while Mursalah means unrestricted, which show that these matters are not specifically addressed by Islamic legal texts. This concept is used in situations where an issue is neither clearly permitted nor prohibited, but a decision is still needed to ensure the well-being of society. In such cases, a scholar makes ruling based on general principle of preventing harm and promoting benefits. Masalih Mursalah plays an important role in modern Islamic law because it allows Sharia to respond to the new challenges while remaining faithful to its core value. Through this concept, Islamic law continues to protect public interests and serve the needs of the community. This section explains that the foundation of Maslahah and Maqasid al-Shari'ah. Maqasid al-Shari'ah refers to the objectives and wisdom behind Islamic legal rulings. According to al-Fasi, understanding these objectives is essential for scholars, especially when issuing legal opinion in cases of differing views. Closely related to this is the concept of maslahah, which means promoting benefit and preventing harm. Al-Ghazali explained that maslahah aims to protect the five essential elements of Sharia, which is religion, life, intellect, lineage, and property. Any action that harms this element is considered mafsadah, while protecting them is regarded of maslahah. Maqasid and maslahah are closely connected, as maslahah is only valid when it aligns with the objective of the Sharia. These objectives are divided into three levels: daruriyat, hajiyat, tahsiniyat, which help prioritize legal rulings. Overall, these principles ensure that Islamic law promotes justice, flexibility, and human welfare. This section discusses the doctrinal status of maslahah across the four Sunni schools of law: the Maliki, Hanafi, Hanbali, and Shafi'i schools. While all schools recognize the importance of promoting welfare in Islamic law, they differ in how far maslahah can function as an independent source of legal rulings. The Maliki, Hanafi, and Hanbali school accept maslahah mursalah, especially in situations where there is no clear textual guidance. They believe that the objective of Sharia is to promote benefit and prevent harm. And since human needs change over time, not every situation can be explicitly addressed in the Quran and Sunnah. And for example, during the COVID-19, mosque closures and the suspension of congregational prayers were permitted to protect life and prevent harm. In contrast, the Shafi'i school generally does not recognize Maslahah Mursalah as independent source of law. This school emphasizes strict adherence to textual evidence and holds that the legal principle should remain consistent, even as society changes. Lastly, in evaluating maslahah, the protection of religion remain the primary concern. When conflict arise, religious obligations are prioritized over worldly benefit.
Next, I will explain the relationship between Maslahah Mursalah and the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic created unprecedented global challenges that affected not only public health but also religious practices and daily life. Many of the issues that emerged during this period were not explicitly addressed in the classical sources of Islamic law, such as the Quran and Sunnah. As a result, Muslim scholars were required to engage in contemporary ijtihad to respond to these new circumstances. In this situation, Maslahah Mursalah played a crucial role as a juristic principle that allows rulings to be made based on public interest when there is no specific textual evidence. This principle ensures that Islamic law remains flexible and responsive while still being rooted in the objective and spirit of Sharia. Through the application of Maslahah Mursalah, scholars were able to issue pandemic-related fatwas that prioritize public welfare, especially the preservation of life. At the same time, these rulings remain faithful to the Quran and Sunnah and also Maqasid al-Shari'ah, demonstrating that Islamic law is capable of addressing modern crises without compromising its fundamental principles.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And my point is, how did Islamic law adapt to a global pandemic? It came down to Maslahah and Mursalah. We can see this in four domains. First, in worship. Congregational prayers and Hajj were suspended, and wasn't a loss of faith, but a move to prevent harm. It is based on the scholarly principle of preserving life. And second is public health. Despite usual rules, alcohol-based sanitizers and vaccines were fast-tracked. Juries ruled that public interest and medical necessity took precedence. Then the third one, the economy. Zakat isn't just a ritual, it is a safety net where funds were redirected to those devastated by the pandemic and to ensure wealth was preserved and the vulnerable were fed. Finally, end-of-life procedures. Funeral rites had to change. It was a difficult balance, but it's still the priority shift to ensuring the safety of those still with us. Through these four lenses, we see how the maqasid, the objectives of Sharia, remain the ultimate guide.
Moving on, the Islamic legal response during the COVID-19 pandemic can be evaluated against the classical condition for the valid application of Maslahah Mursalah. Firstly, the measures adopted were based on genuine and certain benefit. Decisions were made after considering verified scientific data and expert advice from recognized health authorities, ensuring that the perceived benefit was real and not speculative. Secondly, these rulings were consistent with Maqasid al-Shari'ah, particularly in protecting essential values such as life, intellect, and wealth. This alignment shows that the rulings were not arbitrary but deeply connected to the higher objective of Islamic law. Thirdly, the rulings clearly serve the public interest rather than private interest, as they were designed to protect entire communities and reduce widespread harm rather than benefiting specific individuals or groups. Fourthly, the measures did not contradict any clear and definitive text. Instead, they functioned as temporary legal concession, introduced only due to necessity and not intended as permanent changes to establish religious obligation. Finally, the principles of necessity and proportionality were strictly observed. The measures were limited to what was medically required and were gradually lifted once the level of danger decreased. In conclusion, the application of Maslahah Mursalah during the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrates how Islamic law can effectively respond to contemporary challenges while remaining faithful to its classical legal framework and objective. Thank you.
The idea that Maqasid Syariah cannot be used directly as a legal basis arises from confusion with Maslahah Mursalah. Although both share the same categories, Maslahah is part of Maqasid Syariah and is supported by revealed text, while Maslahah Mursalah lacks direct textual evidence. Thus, Imam Shafi'i's rejection of Maslahah Mursalah does not mean rejecting Maqasid Syariah, but rather avoiding rulings based solely on human reasoning. Imam Al-Ghazali supported this by emphasizing that Maqasid Syariah should guide the acceptance of Maslahah Mursalah. Therefore, this study found that the application of Maslahah Mursalah aligns with the health prevention measures introduced by the Ministry of Health of Malaysia during the COVID-19 pandemic. These measures correspond with the essential Islamic principles of protecting religion, life, intellect, lineage, and property while balancing the preservation of worship and public health. This approach reflects the objectives of Islamic law and demonstrates the practical response to an unprecedented health crisis.